an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Veronica Mars, Season 3, Episode 4, Charlie Don't Surf. In this episode, Veronica is hired by the frat house to clear their names because they are so certain none of them is guilty. As it turns out, they might be right. And Logan has a brother. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Agnes for commissioning this episode. I am gonna admit something off the top here. So last episode, I was pretty hard on Logan. And I stand by most of what I said. But I will admit, I had forgotten how violent his dad was. And this episode, getting that story, was really a horrible reminder. I just forgot what a monster his father was. Like, because his murdering Lily, that is something that people who are otherwise not violent can still do. They can still flip out and commit murder. So I feel like some people might sort of laugh and be like, he fucking killed somebody and you forgot he was violent. But you know what I mean? Like, this dude was having an affair with a minor, and she threatened to expose him. That sort of thing can lead a person who would normally never be violent to doing something horrific. And this dude, he had already been this guy, like, to begin with, which I just completely forgot the way that he was. And I will be honest, y'all, when it turns out that there's money going to somebody named Charlie Stone, well, I'm going to tell you what I thought. I thought this was Logan's mom and that she hadn't killed herself, but she had gotten something set up and she was still alive and he had been totally abandoned, but found out that she was like okay and like living large somewhere. And honestly, this is better. I don't want her to have done that to him, you know, like, so I'm not disappointed with the way things turn out. But I do think that, well, I'm going to get to how this goes down because there's a whole thing at the end with the actual Charlie Stone, not the one that's pretending. And I feel like there's sort of a tone to the way we're told what happened that I'm not sure I totally feel. And we will get there. So let's start off with how this episode jumps off. Veronica is going to have dinner with Logan and her dad. And honestly, I really loved this scene. There's like parts of it that I feel, Veronica, if you can't trust Logan to just have a conversation with your dad without putting his foot in his mouth, I feel like you have got bigger fish to fry. You've got bigger problems than this conversation. This is something that I have really grown as, you know, like as somebody who has done dating, and, you know, you guys have probably run into this as well. If somebody doesn't know how to get along with my family, it's not like that's a complete deal breaker, but it depends on why they're not. And there are times where it's, you know, it's going to be your family who's acting a fool, and that's fine. And you are aware that your family can be that way. And so you don't blame your partner, but there's just having really sort of basic what classes are you taking conversation. And she keeps interrupting and being like, how about you move on to something else? It sounds like Logan is about to say that his grades aren't super good. And she turns it around to talk about how he got like late admission because his test scores were super high. Her dad isn't an idiot. He has to see that there was something else Logan had been about to say that got interrupted there, but he leaves it alone because he, is not trying to have this fucking argument right now. But I do think that if you can't trust this kind of basic small talk to your partner to have, the fit might not be super great. This was part of what Owen was really worried about with me, getting to know him from afar and not interacting with any of his friends or family. And I know that it was a huge relief to him when I wound up getting along with his grandmother and grandfather super well. They are easy people to get along with, to be honest, in a lot of ways. But he was worried that I think he was worried based on what he knew of me, that I would not know how to tone certain parts of my personality down when I am around them. Thankfully, I am excellent at dealing with people. I hate doing it, but I'm super good at it. And so he has reached a point now where I can hang out with his family and he's not in the room at all. And he doesn't worry about it. So all I'm saying is I really wanted her to just chill and trust that Logan isn't a moron. Because he's not. He is he the most tactful person, the most thoughtful? No. But I really think that between the two of them, her dad and Logan, they would manage. If Logan missteps, her dad will not flip shit on him. He'll just kind of be like, oh, really? What does that mean? I don't think it would be a big deal. Regardless, things lapse into a kind of back and forth with the two of them, her and her father, where she is joking around with him about how she should have been allowed to vet all of his questions. And this is a really missed opportunity that maybe he'll take on next time. And their banter, the way they are with each other, you can see Logan getting that little half smile as he watches the two of them go back and forth. And this is one of those things that's really great when you watch your significant other engage with people that they've known a long time or who they were raised by. You see the things that they say or their mannerisms reflected by the people that raised them. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's where he gets that. And I feel like there was a little bit of that here with him being oh my God, her dad. That's why she's like this. And then you find out later that he really feels that he has missed out because he doesn't have anybody like that in his life, and certainly not family. And he wishes he did, and he misses it. And he has the distinct feeling that he is missing out by not having that. And this is one of those things that can be really hard because, having talked about Owen and his family, he wanted me to get along with them because they mean a lot to him. But they don't really know him super well. They know the kid that they raised, but as of who he is as an adult, his viewpoints of the world, his opinion on religion, things that they would consider cornerstones of who you are, they do not know the way they think they do. And so I've had a different moment than what Logan is having here, where I've watched the interaction with Owen and his family and been like, my God, they really have no idea who he is. And that's the part that I find really tragic is Owen is a little bit in Logan's position, except that his family isn't toxic, actively toxic the way that Logan's is. They were not violent. They were, well, his father maybe, but there is just something that Owen also doesn't quite have, which is this ease, this rapport of being able to really be himself. And I think a lot of people don't have this. I used to have it pretty well with my mother. My father, not really. Lately, my mother has started to get even more intense with numerology and tarot reading and trying to like predict the future, and I'm not interested. But I don't feel like she doesn't get me at all. And I really feel for people like Logan who are just out there like on their own, whether they actually have family left or not. Logan thinks he doesn't. Even when he finds out he does, he still kind of doesn't. There is something to be said for people in your life who have been there all along and who know things about you without you having to like explain yourself or tell them. And I think those of us who do have that take it for granted a little bit and don't realize what it's like if you grow up without it. And you think that for example, with Logan, the atmosphere of fear and potential violence, you grow up thinking that's normal, and then you go to somebody else's house and you find out that's not normal at all. They don't have that. And then you slowly begin to realize that maybe you're the one who's got it fucked up. That's a fucking shitty thing to come to terms with. And with Logan having as much money as he does, it is such a bizarre thing because he's in this position of extreme privilege, but and total scrutiny as well, but also has been subjected to some horrific shit. So he's just he's a real mess, in summary, is what I'm saying. So then we go to Veronica, and she's going to see Mac at her dorm room. And what is the name of her roommate, Mac's roommate? Because she slams the door in Veronica's face once. Veronica says, "Hey, I really don't think that we can continue to do this." She attempts to slam it again. And Veronica kind of pushes her way in and has it out. Parker, that's her name. Oh, thank you, Rachel. Sorry, I didn't even see that you said it. I just saw it in the caption. Parker is... I'm glad that they had this conversation. I wish it had been a little bit different. My issue is what Veronica does in order to get Parker to listen to her and believe that she knows what she's going through is Veronica has to share that she has also been raped. And what bothered me about this scene is that the thing that Parker keeps harping on is that Veronica apparently thought she was a slut and so let the rape happen under the assumption that she was having consensual sex. And the thing is, I wanted the conversation to be about the fact that Veronica's assumption she was having consensual sex is not the same as the assumption that you're a huge slut who fucks everybody. She could have just been having consensual sex. It's not a judgment. Veronica has sex with Logan. And granted, they are in a monogamous relationship, so it's not the same as casual sex. But nevertheless, Veronica doesn't know anything about what's going on over there. So as far as she knows, maybe she's just entered into a consensual, monogamous relationship. I really wanted this to be less about, I believe you because you also got raped, and more about, having sex doesn't make you a slut. And my assumption that you were having consensual sex was not a judgment call that you were. And I said something about this in the episode where Veronica says that she heard a buzzing sound and she thought that it was like a sex toy, and it turned out to be the electric razor. And for some reason, the assumption that it was a sex toy is like the thing that pushes it over the edge to thinking that she was a big giant slut, which I do not understand that assumption. Like, having a sex toy doesn't mean anything about who you are and how, I don't like the word slut anyway. I don't feel like there is like a point at which I can say, oh, so-and-so is a slut. There's no like line. That's different for everybody. How much sex makes you think, wow, that person really has a lot of sex. But I just feel like this convo could have been a little bit more about how slut shaming in general is bullshit garbage and that Veronica doesn't buy into that. We also have Mac having said about Parker that she was like her dorm room had turned into Grand Central Station because Parker was seeing a lot of dudes. And I can't tell whether or not, as a viewer, I'm supposed to think that Mac was exaggerating, whether that was true and like Mac was correct in the way that she said it, or if Mac was sort of like insinuating that Parker flirted a lot and had a lot of guys interested, but not that she was actually sleeping with all of them. Because it feels like the show is kind of having to have it both ways, where they have Mac essentially say, this girl's a slut. And then the girl be like, I can't believe that you thought I was a slut. And I'm like, well, what is it that you're trying to say here if you're not attempting to be like, I can have as much sex as I want and not be a slut? If that's not the conversation we're having, why did you have that interaction go that way? It's just, I don't know. I felt like they were profoundly missing the point here is kind of where I'm coming from. So Veronica winds up having to share that she was raped, which like, I get wanting to let somebody know that you're coming from a place of understanding on that level, but I also don't love putting women in the position where they have to share really private stories in order to relate to one another. And I didn't want Veronica to feel that she had to tell Parker this. It's not about that. Whether, like, you know, like it shouldn't be about that. But here we are. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Rachel says, is Parker's family pretty strict, religious? I'm trying to remember. It's possible that Parker was always told that consensual sex before marriage equals slut. I don't know. And that's part of my confusion with the way that she's reacting versus the way that Mac talked about her. You know, I mean, the introduction that we get to her is her listening to the Pussycat Dolls on like turned way, way up, and then flirting at the club that they go to, or the bar or whatever it is that they go to where that band is playing, and really like being over the top with all the dudes. So it felt like the show was trying to set up, yeah, this girl's totally a slut. And now they're trying to like backpedal on that. And I don't really get it. And to jump ahead, I'm also not a big fan of the way the show has played what goes on with this frat house either. Because what winds up happening is Veronica tells Parker in this scene, I'm going to find whoever did this to you and I'm going to fucking nail them to the wall. Parker's like, okay, you know what? I misjudged you. Great. Let's fucking nail this dude together. And then when Veronica is hired by the frat house to investigate, which hilariously they seem to expect her to not do. You guys paid $1,500 for this bitch to come in and investigate. I don't know what you thought was going to happen. Y'all have seen the way she is. That should have been forewarning enough, but I digress. Parker is part of a protest that comes to the frat house, and they are like, there's a moment of her staring at Veronica, who is standing on the front porch of the frat house. Dick Casablancas walks up and puts his arm around her. And this causes Parker to feel like Veronica is not on her side after all. It turns out she's working for the frat and therefore is the enemy. And the way the episode wraps with this is Veronica finds out it was not, as far as we can tell with the circumstantial evidence, it was not a frat member who raped Parker. But the show plays it that all of these like rabid feminist protesters rather than being pleased that Veronica has a literal photo of the dude who did it, which I would think would be a huge fucking coup for her. They are instead just angry that she has invalidated their case against the frat. And I don't love that. That feels like the writers kind of being like, these feminists, they just get on a kick, and then when you try and prove them wrong, all they want is to just hate the people that they hate and blame the people they want to blame. And regardless of who actually did it, they want to punish the people that they have seen as the potential perpetrators the whole time. I don't know about y'all, but if I were one of these girls, I wouldn't be reacting this way at all. This did not feel real to me in any way. You know, it's like they are for some reason ignoring the very concrete evidence of a photo of Parker really drunk, potentially drugged, at an ATM with a very particular dude standing behind her. Now, that dude standing behind her may not be the guy. He might have been waiting to use the ATM. We're standing here looking at this dude and assuming because he's in the photo, he was with her, he's the one who raped her, therefore that's the guy. It's circumstantial. We don't know that. It seems to be pretty good evidence, though. These chicks don't seem to care about that, and I find that really difficult. I don't understand. Like, is this something that are the writers basing this on something that actually happened? Oh, Rachel says, I don't think it was Parker in the photo. It was Claire, the one in the middle from last week's episode. You're right. I forgot that was who it was. Blondes. They start to blend together. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I don't really feel like this reaction of all of these girls just being angry at Veronica rings true. The only thing that I could say, but they don't really make this point clear, especially they don't in the final conversation that Veronica actually has with Parker. Veronica finally is like, look, I was out for the truth. If you want to nail somebody to the wall who didn't do it just to have them nailed there, I am not your guy. That's not what I do. I'm out here looking for who actually did it. And Parker is sort of left like huffy and with her arms folded, like, ugh, but not really having much to say to that. I would have liked a conversation about if Parker really does feel that Veronica is working for the frat. Maybe she says something like, how do I know that the frat didn't pay you to find what you needed to get them out of it? And that you have a vested interest in making sure that they are not found to be the perpetrators, which that is a particular kind of concern. Veronica is looking at this, that the frat came to me to ask me to investigate them. I needed access to all of the members in order to do my investigation that I was already planning on doing anyway. So I decided to make the most of this opportunity that they volunteered for and ask all the questions that I could and find out everything that I could. And that is like, that's a genuine conversation that could go back and forth with Parker asking Veronica what her motives are. How invested is she in making sure that the frat didn't? But that conversation doesn't come up. It's just the sheer fact that Veronica found evidence that they are not the ones that all of these girls are having a problem with. And I just don't see it. It feels like the show is trying to paint these women with a very legit grievance as being unreasonable harpies who are just out for blood. And I do not like it at all. I really don't. So I don't know, guys. I'm just choosing a rape as the center of a plot for a show like this is already a really tricky thing. Rape is such a fraught issue. I would love to know exactly how many women were on the staff writing this and whether or not, like, I just want to know who was in charge and have they been interviewed about it since? And how do they feel about this work and how it stands up? Because I am not convinced so far that this is going in a direction that feels worthwhile. You know, I feel like talking about this kind of topic, you have to be so careful. And if you're not going to exercise that sort of restraint and caution, just don't fuck with it. Don't do it at all. You've got to be measured in it and really think through what it is you're trying to say with every character's interaction and their reaction to things. And that is not to say that you can't have people who are calling Parker a slut, because that's life. That's what happens. You know, a girl she accuses a dude of rape and immediately her entire sexual history is called into question, whether or not she actually wanted it, but then changed her mind. Does she have a grievance against him? All of that is 100% how it works. So if you're going to include that, that's fine. But you are going to need to make it clear where you stand and where you expect the audience to stand. And I don't think they're doing that well. They are muddying the waters a lot in various places. And it feels like they just didn't really consider certain things at all. Rachel says, agreed. I just looked up this episode and it was co-written by a woman and a man. Okay. So there was I don't know. So anyway, the whole thing with the questioning of the frat too, it's like I said, it's really funny because they hire Veronica to do this investigation, and they're like very pushy about it because fucking Dick shows up at her door. Guys, I really hate Dick Casablancas so much. Like, so very much. I really hate him. I hate everything about who he is. I hate his fucking hair. I hate his, like, aren't I a charming stinker attitude. You're not charming, dude. You're a creep. You're a predator. And I hate you. And you really should go somewhere away from society and just enjoy, like, having privilege still. And stop inflicting yourself on the rest of the world. But that aside, he insists they want Veronica for this case. They want her because they know that she's good and always manages to get to the bottom of things. Which, like, yeah. But then immediately when she starts asking questions, they're like, what the fuck are you doing? I can't believe you're asking me this. Who are you? We're here so that you can exonerate us. What are you even talking about? And I'm like, dude, guys, what did you think was going to happen when you hired her? The whole reason you did is because she's good at her job. So let her do her job. Like, honestly, when you hire somebody like Veronica, what you should do is have everybody's written statements prepared before you even go to her to ask for her help. And then give her the written statements ahead before she talks to anybody so she can look over them. You can have your story straight. And then she will come and talk to you if she has additional questions or requests for details or whatever. It's just bizarre how they sort of think that this girl who they know despises all of them and does not trust them at all is going to simply work to clear their names without actually double checking any information. Why would they think that, you idiots? So then she has this like whole thing with this one dude whose name I'm forgetting. He looks so much like the kid who played Brad on Home Improvement, and that's who I keep thinking he is, even though it's not. And she believes is having an affair with this kid, Charles. They call him Charleston because his last name is Chu. With Charleston's girlfriend. I don't know where she got this. Do you guys have anything that you can help me with there? Did he tell her that he was sleeping with Charleston's girlfriend, because she like kind of corners him in the cafeteria asking him what was going on there. He makes a joke about how Charleston can't like withstand any kind of questioning and how quickly he caved. And then the scene cuts and we go straight to her talking to Charleston's girlfriend. So I am assuming that he told her this, but I gotta be honest, guys, when I first watched this scene, I thought she was straight up like shooting in the dark and trying to see what stuck. Like, I didn't think that she had any actual evidence that this girl was sleeping with that kid. I thought she was trying to come up with a reason why he would have tried to close the door against Charleston and just look out, you know, like, because Charleston's assertion here is that maybe, we'll call him Brad, maybe Brad was committing the rape when Charleston went to his room, and that's why Brad was so like pissed at being interrupted, and why he was naked and sweating, and why he didn't want to let Charleston see into the room. And I could see Veronica being like, well, maybe he didn't want you to see because he didn't want you to see who she was. Not even that he was like, you know, committing rape, but that he knew you'd be pissed. Maybe it's your girlfriend. And that she just goes and talks to the girlfriend on this sort of like assumption. The girlfriend does not comply at all with Veronica's questions. She doesn't cave and be like, oh my God, I can't believe that he told you. I can't believe, like, no, she is unwilling to participate in this at all. Veronica says something like, if you don't give him an alibi for the time of this rape, this could go really, really badly for him. And the girl is just like, well, I don't know what you even are talking about, and I don't have anything to come clean about, and walks off. So I was sort of left thinking, oh, so Veronica tried to tried this theory to see if the girl would cave. She didn't. So I guess she's not sleeping with that kid. But then there's no further explanation. So I guess what I'm supposed to believe is that he did tell Veronica for sure that's who he was fucking. She isn't going to play ball and isn't going to like open up to a total stranger in the park, which I am not mad at her for. And Veronica, like, she basically called Veronica's bluff and was like, well, if you're going to make it tough for him, I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But if you thought that was going to be enough to get me to say shit, you were wrong. And since we don't get any other explanation of what was going on with that kid, I assume that we are meant to sort of just think that he told her and she called Veronica's bluff. Rachel says, are you talking about Chip Diller? I don't know. Rachel, is that his name? Chip Diller. That's unfortunate. Maybe that's him, though. Because he has like the short, spiky hair and that tan and like a freckle thing. One of the head guys at the frat, right? Yeah, exactly. And she runs into him at the in the cafeteria a little bit later and notices that his hands are bruised. And that is one of the things that she sort of like, that sets alarm bells off for her, thinking that maybe he was involved in something violent. And that's what, and then she notices that Dick Casablancas also has those marks on his hands. And what it turns out it is, the girls who have been trying to get the frat shut down heard that they were having what was called a boo room, I think is what they call it, for their haunted house. And their claim is that they are going to, they're just doing this in order to scare people. They're going to dress all in black. The room is going to be pitch black. They're going to jump out, and it's going to be spooky and scary for Halloween times. However, the girls have overheard that the dudes are actually using this as a means of groping women, which really sounds much more plausible to me. And so what they did was they wore costumes, they were dressed as rats, and then covered every part of their body that was gropable with an open mousetrap waiting to be sprung. So these dudes go to try and grope them, and instead a mousetrap snaps down on their hands, which honestly, it is genius. It's a really great move, and I 100% approve of this. It's the best. Like, don't you just wish that shit was the way it worked, period? I mean, you know, makes me think of that movie Teeth. So that is part, like, Dick Casablancas is like, you know, she hears that he chased some girl out of there and was screaming at her. And it turns out that's why he was really mad, because they got him, and they got a couple of his friends as well. And they are all too embarrassed to admit that they got caught trying to grope. And, you know, I would really, as much as it's super satisfying for this, like, little prank, the mouse traps to go off, I want more to happen there. You know, I would have liked there to be a front page story in addition to all of the rapes coincide with parties from this frat house, which does wind up on the front page, by the way. And I really love Veronica's line. She says, "Oh, wow, colored ink. It must be true." And I think this is like the only time we see Wallace this whole episode, but he points out that there's like a graph that they made to like show how things lined up. So I would have liked it if the fact that this had turned into a grope room were part of the reporting. It doesn't seem like this is common knowledge at all. And the girls, like, who did the prank with the mousetraps, I don't think they would have gotten in trouble for it, right? Because that's just part of their costumes. And if the guys hadn't touched them, nothing would have happened. So I think they could have just pled ignorance and like, we didn't mean to harm them. We were just wearing mousetraps as part of our costume. It was no big deal. And I think that they could have like gotten away with that pretty well. But anyway, all of this to say, the way that Veronica tracks down the information about who was with Claire is she talks to one of the girls who says that she thought she saw Claire in front of this convenience store. But when she yelled for Claire didn't respond. So Veronica's sort of like, I wonder if she was right, though, because the girl's like, she didn't respond, so it wasn't Claire. Veronica's like, maybe it was, though. And we find out that the girl was super drunk. This leads me to one of the best moments, I think, ever of this show, which is Veronica talking to the guy who works at the convenience store. Can we talk about this angel of a man who just delivers his lines so well? I want him in literally everything. He is so great in this scene, and I was fucking cracking up, guys. I swear to God. So she comes in. She, like, before she can even, you know, ask her question, he's like, "We're not hiring." And she's like, no. I have a photo here. Can you tell me if you saw this girl? First she says, "I was wondering who worked last Saturday night." And he says, "I work every Saturday night. What else am I gonna do?" You know, in this way of just this, like, I am resigned to the fact that I have nothing going on in my life. I may as well be here. Who cares? Which right out of the gate, I'm just like, all right, I like this guy. She shows him the photo and he says, yeah, I saw her so drunk she could barely stand. If your parents knew what you kids really do here. And she says, "Are you sure it was her?" He says, "She was with a guy. She's fallen asleep on my magazine rack. He's trying to scrape together change to buy prophylactics. Then he's all mad because he can't use a credit card unless he spends $15. So I sent him next door to the ATM. They came back later. He bought his raincoat. One less bastard child conceived by morons. Everyone's happy." I swear to God, everyone's happy. Oh, it would, like, granted, this turns, like, what that turned into was a rape, so it should not be funny, but the way this dude, his, like, world-weary, sick of college kids fucking attitude, I get it, man, you know, like, he's just so good in the scene. So, she manages to get the photo from the ATM security camera, which captures Claire and the dude that's standing behind her. And like I said, we're assuming the dude standing behind her is the one that was with her trying to buy a condom. I would have liked to see Veronica show that photo to the guy in the convenience store, if for no other reason than to just see him again. But I would have liked for her to get the confirmation that's the dude, right? Because like I said, it could have just been another like ATM customer. However, it is 2 a.m, so the likelihood of there being a line for the ATM at that hour is not high. Regardless, this is one of those moments that if I were younger and I was less familiar with the way the world works, for me, this would be a problem that Veronica finds this out. Because I would be like, well, wouldn't Claire have seen an ATM transaction on the date that she was raped and tell the cops and they would like figure this all out themselves? But now that I'm older, I have grown to learn how the cops do not give a shit if you're raped. They could care less. Like, there's this whole thing with Abolish the Police right now where people are responding with, well, who are you going to call if you get assaulted or if you get raped? And the answer is, my friends to have my back, because the police do exactly nothing. That's just the fact. Like, you ask any woman who has been assaulted and went to the cops what her experience was, and I can guarantee you with like a 0.5% caveat that they were dismissed. That they were treated as if maybe they just changed their mind and you're regretting it and now you're trying to cry rape. Maybe you deserved it because you didn't try hard enough to defend yourself. Maybe you shouldn't have gotten so drunk. What were you wearing? Where were you at that time of night? You shouldn't have been there in the first place. I mean, what did you think people were going to think? And then, to top it off, rape kits sitting on shelves untested for literal decades. And you've got all these dudes out here committing serial rapes, and nobody knows. Oh, what a mystery. How could we have been? Because you don't care. Just admit it. Just say you don't give a shit and stop acting like you are our last defense against the big bad world when you don't care. You never cared. You have never attempted to care at all. And we aren't stupid, and we know that. So yeah, the fact that she was able to find this information within like a pretty short amount of time, I'm not surprised that she was doing more than the cops have done. I mean, there's a whole thread on Twitter, several of them, where somebody's like, tell me about an interaction you had with the cops that worked out for you. And it's all stories of the opposite, and people basically doing the police work for the cops, and the cops being like, sorry, don't know what to tell you, for having property stolen that was literally monogrammed and finding their monogrammed item on Craigslist, and the cops just being like, well, I guess you can buy it back. What are you talking to us for? Like, you know, shit like that. Cops are worthless. Abolish the police. Fuck the police. Hashtag all of that. Anyway, I've done all of that. Let's talk about what's going on with Logan. So it turns out that there is some money missing. And I'm excited to see this revealed because I had been sort of wondering what Logan was doing with his money and how that was going, because it did seem like at times he was spending a lot. He's still living in a hotel, which is just insane to me. And there's this immediate suspicion that he has that maybe like his accountant is skimming off the top. What we find out is that the money had been going to this like defunct, first it was what was it? Aaron's kids, which I just could not think of Scott's Tots from The Office. But Aaron's Kids, apparently, which had originally been a nonprofit, was wrapped up, and yet the money's still going to it. And it turns out that it's Aaron's Kids with a Z, which is most certainly not a nonprofit. And once Veronica continues to dig and find out more about what happens to the money that goes there, she uncovers that Logan's father had an affair and had a kid by, I don't know if we are aware, because we get this whole story about, you know, Charlie's Charlie's mom being a stewardess, but that's all coming from the, is it Vanity Fair or Variety? I think it's Vanity Fair. It's all coming from that journalist. So I don't know if he did the research and he is just like giving Logan the story about the real Charlie Stone that he actually found out, or if he just invented something whole cloth. But the story that he gives is that Aaron Eccles knocked up his mom, who is a stewardess, and that he has like known Aaron Eccles was his dad this whole time, but that he and originally was kind of like jealous of Logan, but the more he watched Logan, the more he began to realize that he was glad he didn't have Logan's life after all. And it's sort of an unfortunate, like, because it's the sort, it feels in the moment like you're kind of like, I mean, that's sort of a tactless thing to say right now. Charlie, what are you doing here? Being like, huh, your family's real fucked up, so I started to just be glad I wasn't one of y'all. And then we find out who he is, and the way he decided to play that whole scene made a lot of sense. Essentially, what he is doing is trying to provoke a reaction from Logan where Logan opens up so that he has fodder. I would love to see, I think his real name is Norman, if I'm not mistaken. I would love to see Norman skinned alive. This dude is trash. And I can't imagine pulling this kind of shit. He pretend, and he has to know that his cover is going to be blown eventually, because he's going to publish this, right? Before Logan actually finds out about it and like scoops him with Larry King. And so the story winds up being canceled. So part of me is like, isn't there any sort of law against this? Like finding out all of this information via essentially identity theft and fraud. I don't know if that holds up in court or what, but I would imagine that if he tried, Logan could sue him and Vanity Fair into oblivion. However, I don't know that. I have a lot of assumptions about the way things work, and it turns out the world is not that good. And so there's no leg for a person to stand on, as it turns out. So I might be way off base here. But the dude is out here encouraging this man under false pretenses to share the trauma of abuse that he experienced, and is planning to turn that into money. That kind of human being should be disintegrated in a vat of acid. Like, there is no way that you come back from being that sort of person to me. That's it. Done. Sorry. It's a wrap on whether or not you're fucking viable as a human being. The end. And Logan's reaction when he finds out that this dude is lying, it's such a shame, because Logan wants this so much that he really like falls for it hook, line, and sinker, just because he feels so alone and isolated, and he wants this person to get it. And I love that Norman's basically like, oh, please hit me. That would be such a great opening line. As if he really, like, just assumes Logan would never. And Logan punches him anyway. And you know what, buddy? I wish you had punched him again. I wish you had punched him, that when he fell down, you walked up to him and you stomped on his nuts. That's what I wish, Logan. You could have done way worse than that, and I would have been 100% behind you, buddy. No question. Fuck that guy forever. And to find out later on that Logan got his, like, grandfather's watch out and gave it to this dude, and the dude doesn't give it back. Veronica has to go and get it from him. What kind of psychopath? You've got to have no conscience. He gave you a family heirloom and you plan to keep that shit? I mean, I get not wanting to see him face to face again. Ship it back. Do something. Jesus Christ. It's just so horrifying. Rachel says, strange/fun fact, the actor who played fake Charlie/Norman went on to play a character named Logan on Gilmore Girls. Or rather, he was already playing that character. Weird. So yeah, it come to find out, and I don't remember exactly how Veronica senses that the guy thinks who's saying he's Charlie isn't. It's like she just has sort of a gut instinct that something ain't right about this dude. So she goes and investigates, and she finds the actual Charlie Stone, who is a professor. And I really enjoy that he's like real tall and lanky, sort of like Logan is. They really nailed each of these guys looking enough like Logan to be believably his brother, but looking like him in different ways. And Logan is under the mistaken impression, because the only person who knew about his secret brother is whoever like set up these deposits, who, if they haven't blabbed by now, they weren't gonna. Veronica, who found this out, and her dad, because she told him, and himself. So he calls Charlie Stone. All of a sudden, here's a reporter trying to delve into his life. He goes by a very understandable, like, you know, degrees of possibility. Is like, well, obviously this dude told the press, so fuck him. And decides that he's going to go on Larry King, both to scoop Vanity Fair so that they will kill the article, and to fuck over this half brother of his who apparently is trying to like extort him or fuck with him somehow. But when Veronica goes to his house to get the pocket watch back, this guy reveals to her this brother never came to him and told him anything. He had a tap on the dude's phone, which I am assuming he means Logan's phone. I might be wrong about that. I don't see why he's tapping Charlie Stone's phone, who's a nobody. I would have loved for Veronica to be able to nail this reporter for an illegal wiretap, because I feel like that could have been really something. If she had gotten him on tape saying that, that would have been... I feel like a lot could have been done with that. But unfortunately, it's just in the you know, conversation. So we see this moment of Charlie Stone just like trying to get from his fucking car into his school that he teaches at, being hounded by like 20 reporters, all demanding questions and, you know, yada, yada, yada. And after Veronica finds out that Charlie Stone didn't tell anybody, that he was really wanted to stay anonymous, Logan feels like a total piece of shit, because he basically alienated this dude, put his whole history on blast with no permission at all, and just fucked him over, and for no reason. He thought he was getting back at somebody who was trying to fuck him over, and it turns out this is just a kid who grew up with no father and is doing his best, and he wound up in the crossfire of some fucking shit that had nothing to do with him. Now, hear me out, y'all, because sure, I understand Logan feeling bad about this. I understand being like, wow, I really made a lot of assumptions there. I can't believe that all right, better luck next time. But I have to say, this dude is getting $10,000 a month. I don't feel that bad for him. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, it sucks to have the world know your business. It sucks for there to be paparazzi following your ass around. This story will blow over. I give it 2 weeks max, you know, like before people just kind of lose interest and who cares. And in the meantime, you've been getting $10,000 a month. I feel like that's a really fair price to pay. I'm just saying. Like, I last year just about cracked, I think, $32,000, which is literally the most I have ever made in a year in my life. This is me living large at $32,000 a year, kids. That's not including taxes owed. And the idea of getting $10,000 a month, what do you even do with that kind of money? I don't even understand. Like, when you get past a certain point, I'm just sort of like, that doesn't mean anything to me anymore. You know, like $10,000 is just such a life-changing sum to someone like me. I could pay off my credit card debt entirely. In 2 months, I could have almost all my student loans paid off. Probably about 3/4. Give me a year? Unspoiled becomes the #1 show on iTunes because I just advertise the fuck out of everything and all of a sudden I'm famous. I can't imagine getting that kind of money my whole life, which I am assuming has been what's been happening. So I'm not trying to say Logan has nothing to feel guilty about. But obviously for Logan, what's going on here is much more personal. He wants a relationship with this half-brother, and now he feels like the very thing he wanted, because of some other asshole ruining it, he has shot himself in the foot and alienated the one person left in his life that he could have had something with. And that fucking sucks, and I 100% get it, Logan. Like, I really... However, I'm just saying in terms of the show, trying to be like, look what Logan did to this guy. He's just a humble professor trying to live his life, and Logan sicked the press on him. And I'm just kind of like, he's not a humble professor. He went to private schools and is doing just fine. I'm not worried about him. It's going to be fine. Like, if anybody can afford to miss some fucking work until shit dies down, it's this guy. He could take a sabbatical for 1.5 years and be fine. He could hire security full time to follow him around and keep the press off him. He'd be fine. You know, he has the resources to do that sort of thing. So I'm just not concerned about it. Now, we may find out at some point that he's been like this unbelievable philanthropist with this money and been doing all kinds of things for other people. And if so, that's great. But that doesn't really change my stance on it, which is that he had the privilege of being able to do that, you know? So anyway, this was heartbreaking. Like, Logan's attitude, like I said, was very hard on him last episode. And I still feel in a lot of ways like it was justified. I'm not really going to take it back. But I forgot what he went through even before the whole thing with Lily. Even before, you know, the sort of nuclear family thing began to fall apart, the nuclear family he had was absolute poison. So I guess it's not too surprising that now that he is left with nobody, maybe like growing as a person isn't exactly high on his priority list, because he's finally sort of like free from some of the worst things that he experienced, and it's a lot heavier than what a lot of people go through. So I don't want to be trying to pass judgment on whether he should have like moved through it by now. What I am saying, and what I said last time, is that he needs to go to therapy. He can afford it. He could have a therapist appointment every single day, and he should. 1000% he should. So yeah, the episode wraps up basically with all of the angry feminists mad at Veronica because she cleared the frat's name, which honestly I don't even think she did. She got them off on this one charge that they were involved in Claire's rape. Everything else, as far as I am concerned, is completely up for grabs. We don't even know that this is all one rapist. We are assuming that because he's shaving all these girls' heads. But I would not be at all surprised if some dude somewhere heard about it and was like, oh my God, he raped them and then he shaved their heads. That's fucking genius. And then decided to do that just because they're fucking horrifying. So it remains to be seen. It's just this one instance. And I'm super curious what gets done with the photo of this guy who was behind Claire, because, you know, having actual photographic evidence, and it's clear, you can see this dude very well. You can circulate that. And I imagine if he is on campus, find him pretty quick. The question is he on campus? Or is he some like just opportunist that sort of makes his way onto campus in order to prey on young women who he knows are going to be inebriated, and he has nothing to do with the school at all, which is certainly possible. But we're only on episode, 4 is this? Yeah. So there's a while to go here. So anyway, I'm going to wrap. Thank you guys again so much for hanging out with me. And I thank you, Agnes, for commissioning this episode. I hope that y'all can bear with me on being angry about certain things and understand where I'm coming from. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on how this is handled, but I'm sure that how it's handled is heavily influenced by the ending and the way things wrap, and so you can't tell me about that part. So we're just going to have to wait and see. So yeah, thank you guys again, and I will be seeing you soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.